Welcome to another edition of Giants Top 100 Players presented by Bud Light. I'm Bob Papa, joined by Bob Glauber, longtime writer for the National Football League, covering the New York Football Giants. And Bob was part of the blue ribbon panel that we assembled in compiling the top 100 players in Giants history. And Bob, over 5,000 players have worn a Giants uniform since 1925. Really unique challenge in trying to figure out who fits and in what eras, and how to judge the numbers from the different eras.
That, you said the different eras. That is the big challenge. You're talking about players you're familiar with. I covered Sean, I covered Plaxico. Okay, I know that it's a little bit easier. Players from the 30s and 40s and, and 20s, it's a little bit more challenging. So, you do your research and you do your homework, you talk to people, and you kind of get a sense of who ranks where. And it was one of the most enjoyable, challenging things that you can do.
Yeah, and it's understanding the history of the franchise, and it kind of all comes into play. And you mentioned Sean Landeta. He comes in at number 47. Sean's first 8.5 years with the Giants, all he did was win 2 Super Bowls. Voted to the all-decade team by the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not only in the 80s, but in the 90s. Sean, for you, how do you put this in intellectual context when you think about being voted as one of the top 100 players?
Well, first of all, my first thought is to thank whoever was on that blue ribbon panel to feel that I belonged, because certainly when you say those numbers, 5,000 players and only 100, very easily you can say, well, I may have played well, but certainly wouldn't be on that list. So it's a great, great honor to be on that list for any team, but especially a team like the New York Giants with their history.
Landeta's kick, a beauty. That's a 55-yard kick to the 15-yard line.
Very lucky, I think, that I played here when I did. It's such a great group of teammates, tremendous coaches. You mentioned we were fortunate to win 2 Super Bowls, and just a great, great time in my career. I did cherish my years here, and again, just very grateful to be part of this.
And Plaxico, number 46 on the list. I remember the news came across that Plaxico Burress had signed with the New York Giants, and I remember saying, that's the ticket. Now to be voted one of the top 100 players in franchise history and inside the top 50. When you reflect upon all of it, does it seem real?
I was shocked. I was surprised. I was sitting at my desk on, I believe it was a Saturday, when you reached out to me and called me and said that, I've been selected amongst the top 100 players to ever wear a New York Giant uniform. And I just said to myself, I was like, wow. I kind of just, sat back for a minute and just thought about all those great players and all the great teams that came before me. And, being a kid growing up in Virginia, we didn't have professional football. So the only time I got to see the New York Giants on TV was when they were playing Washington. And going back to that and watching those guys play back in the 80s and early 90s, and for me to be sitting here today selected amongst the top football players to ever play for this organization, I mean, it's an honor and a privilege, and I just thank for everybody, New York Giants and the organization for including me.
You mentioned Washington. You can't talk about the Giants in Washington without talking about the 1986 NFC Championship game. And this man right here was literally the central figure in all that. The wind at Giants Stadium back in those days before they had built the press box and wind patterns was brutal. And Bill Parcells defers the opening kickoff to play the wind game. And your teammates say that it is arguably the greatest game ever by a punter, because you were a key component in keeping Washington pinned against the wind and creating field position for you guys to win 17-0.
Well, I was very fortunate that day. I appreciate them saying that. There certainly were many other guys I thought more valuable than me, but I was kind of lucky that I got to practice in it every single day. I mean, every Sunday before the game, the other kicker and punter would come right over to me and say, "What's going on in this place?" And I said, "I don't really know what to tell you," and because it was so difficult. But I was very lucky to be able to practice it in every day.
Here's Landeta's punt. That's a great punt against the wind. The Giants are going to down it inside the 5. Great punt by Landeta. 46 yards, was in the air for 5 seconds.
But more important, just very fortunate that day to have a good day in a game with that meaning, and we'll always be very happy about that, obviously, because that was certainly one of the great days in our team's history.
Phil Simms talks about that performance of yours a lot, and he said that's one of the most underrated, performances ever, and played such a key role in that game. And for you personally, I know it was important, and it was the beginning, still the beginning of a very, very long career. I know you came to the Giants from the USFL. And we're telling this story. I did a story for Newsday about the addition of the 17th NFL game. Home players are saying, "Oh, it's a lot." And I reached out to Sean and Bart Oates. They played 43 games in less than a year, including preseason, between the USFL Stars and the New York Giants in '85. All right, they're exhausted, and the Bears beat them. They're exhausted. But then that next year, it kind of all came together. And you were such a big part of that in that game.
Well, I appreciate it. I can remember Bart having lunch with him at the end of that '85 season in December, and I said, "Man, how do you feel?" He goes, "I'm barely getting by. I mean, as a center, going through what he has to go to, as you said, 40-some games in 52 weeks, and all punters have back soreness, leg soreness, but I couldn't even think of being sore compared to what he had to go through. Again, all those games in a short window. But yeah, that's interesting that maybe the NFL at some point is going to go to 2-18, and hopefully they put another bye-in week in there for those guys because they deserve it. But yeah, we came from a league where you played 18 games and they just got used to it.
Another challenge for Sean was he followed a legend in Dave Jennings.
Yes.
I mean, Dave Jennings was a super popular player. I know a punter, but there were bad teams that he starred on, and you took over and really didn't miss a beat.
Well, yeah, I was very fortunate. Dave was a wonderful guy. I thought, which was normal, here I am 10, 11 years younger than him, and he may not treat me so well. I'm coming to take his job. He's been a great punter here for years, but he could not have been more fair, friendly, and polite. And I remember that first year, every Monday night, I would go to his house in Saddle River, New Jersey, and we'd watch Monday Night Football because he was playing for the Jets, so he could still live at home. And he was just so great to me as a young player, and I never forgot that. And all the years I played, that rubbed off on how I treated other punters through the years that I played. I never treated him poorly in training camp because I remember how gracious he was with me.
Plaxico, we talked about Sean in an NFC Championship game having one of his greatest games. Well, one of your greatest games came in an NFC Championship game, 2007 NFC Championship game in Green Bay against the Packers.
Welcome to Lambeau Field in Green Bay for the NFC Championship game. Second coldest game ever at Lambeau Field, -1 degree with a wind chill of -23.
And Al Harris kind of tweaked you a little bit leading into all that.
You know what? We lost to them pretty handily here in Giant Stadium. I think they put like 40 points on us in 16.
That year was so physically challenging for you because of your ankle. You barely practiced, right? Yeah. How challenging is that?
A lot of people don't know this. Al Harris was the one that I was running a 7, a post corner, and he was playing on the outside, and I went to shake him inside, and he stepped on my ankle, and he popped my tendon. He was the one that hurt me, for the rest of the year. And I remember getting into the locker room after that game. I'm saying to myself, I say, man, we're not going to play these guys again unless we get to the NFC Championship game. And we just happened to get to the NFC Championship game. And I believe it was that Monday. Sam Madison came to me. He said, man, I don't know what you did to Al Harris, but Al Harris said he's going to shut you down. I was like, man, get out of my face, man. I don't want to hear that. So I'm in the locker room before the game starts. And they're interviewing the players, and I watch him go on TV, and he says, how do you plan on slowing down Plaxico Burress? And on national television, he said, oh, this is Green Bay. He knows what he's going to get. He's going to get me in his face all day. And that really had me going. It really stinged me.
Manning from the gun, back to throw, zips one left. Burress has it on the run at the 40 and knocked down at the 47-yard line as he beat Al Harris on the slant. Looks right, throws right, looking for Burress, who makes the catch over the defender at the 35-yard line. He went hand-to-hand with Al Harris, and he beat him.
Manning takes back to throw. He wings it over the right side, and he's got Burress again. He turned around Al Harris out of bounds at the 11-yard line of Green Bay. Goodness.
I was a big film guy. I was a big study guy. Al was one of those guys where if he didn't initially jam you, he would run with you. He would try to arm bar you because he was so strong, and his arms were probably the same length as mine, even though he was only 6'1". And every time he went to double hand jam me, instead of knocking his hands down, I was knocking his hands up. And if he stuttered, he gave me a step. That was the step I needed to get going, and he never figured it out. And, it's just pretty much just pitch and catch. And listen, I had already lost two AFC championship games to the Patriots, so it was my third one in like year 8. And I was saying to myself, listen, I'm not going back home. We have to find a way to get it done. And, that year was pretty trying for me with the ankle. It was me just finding enough energy through the week to get back to the game on Sundays. And they allowed me to do so. And in return, we ended up having a great year and finish off right.
That combination of you and Amani Toomer, what was it like working with Amani? Because you brought a couple different things to the table. And I'll still never forget that game in Philadelphia where Eli got sacked like 100 times in the first half. And you guys come back, and I think Toomer caught the game tying, and then you got the overtime winner on Brian Dawkins.
Yeah, we were down 17 going into the second half. And in 06. When I initially came here, Amani was the ex-wide receiver. So I don't think he was initially too happy with going to the Z. And, he was kind of, me and him were kind of, quiet when I first arrived. And we slowly became, good teammates, great friends. And we had a tremendous amount of respect for each other. I think one of the things that people don't, realize about Amani is that he was a perfectionist. He wanted to do everything right and get everything right. Trust me, when you was in a wide receiver meeting with him, he never lost a debate or an argument based on what his assignment was. But he was one of the most craftiest wide receivers that I had ever seen, ever played with. In the Green Bay game, he makes his diving catch on the sideline. His whole body's out of bounds, but his toes are on the ground. And he did it time after time. We just complimented each other so well.
Plaxico, every time that the Giants play a road game in Arizona, the visitors' locker room is the same as Super Bowl 42 and that tunnel. And as I walk to the Giants bench, I stop at that yard line and at that hash. And first I walk into the end zone where you caught the Super Bowl winning catch, and then I go to stand where Eli was. Take us through what that was like for you, because every kid that plays sports either wants to hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth to win a World Series, hit a jump shot, or catch a touchdown pass to win a Super Bowl.
I just remember, walking on the field for that drive. Michael's going up and down the sideline screaming, back and forth. As you believe it, we'll get it done, we'll win.
17-14 is the final, okay? 17-14, fellas. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
We have this drive. One of the plays outside of David Tyree's catch that people don't really pay a lot of attention to was the third down play that Smitty made to stay in bounds. You're talking about a rookie to have the alertness to understand and know where he was at that certain time. Because if he just goes out of bounds right then, we're probably at 4th and 2. But he stays in bounds and gets his third down. And then obviously we get to the play where I scored on. And
1st and 10 at the 13. 39 seconds to go. Giants down by 4.
It's an X fade, and I had watched so much film on Ellis Hobbs. And I played against him in week 16, and for some strange reason, when he jumped in a zero coverage, he would back up to the goal line and he would stop his feet. And I watched him do it over and over and over again. And when the play was called, I said to myself, first of all, Eli grabbed me when I came out of the huddle. He was like, hey, if the guys give you one-on-one, I'm throwing. And I'm like, man, they're not going to double cover me now. They'll be crazy. So as sure as I get to the line, then zero coverage. And I say to myself, listen, if he does exactly what I've been watching him do on film, he's going to back up to the goal line. He's going to stop his feet. And I said to myself, if he stops his feet, I'm just going to give him a move and run right by him. If you watch the game, the pregame, me and Eli were throwing that same pass. It's like repetition. We can do it with our eyes closed. And it was just 1, 2, 3, boom, and get back to the corner of the end zone. And the ball came down, and the rest is history.
Manning calling signals, takes the snap, looks left, lobs it left, Burress is wide open, touchdown Giants! left corner of the end zone.
Touchdown.
With 35 seconds to go, and the Giants regain the lead. Manning to Burress.
To be able to end that game in that fashion, it still kind of, gives myself the goosebumps sometimes.
Plaxico, you did your thing, coming up clutch for your team when they needed it most. How on earth does this feel?
For us to come out here and get a win, man, it just means so much.
Just for all of those things to come together at that moment and the way that we finished that game, man, it's still just, I lose words for it sometimes.
I don't think I've ever asked you this, just out of curiosity as I'm listening to you talking. I mean, it must be so amazing. Do you ever think about, I caught the game-winning touchdown in a Super Bowl? I mean, how many guys on the planet Earth, how many Super Bowls have been there? 57, 58? A number of teams have won. I mean, how many guys have caught a game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl? I mean, that just, for you to have that forever.
I think I understand it, but maybe I don't. Obviously growing up as a kid, every kid wants to get to the pinnacle of the sport, and we walk down the street throwing the ball up in the air. He's alone in the end zone. 3-2-1, the game is over. But, just being there in the moment, and I remember getting back to the hotel after the game, and Coach came to me and he was like, "You don't even understand what you just did." I was like, "Man, we won the Super Bowl." And it really, some days it grabs me to really understand the magnitude of what we were able to accomplish and what I did in that game. But still to this day, it's still like every day I live here in New Jersey, and I have kids who were 9 and 10 at the time, and now these kids are in college. And that's one of the things that you enjoy the most, because they were 8, 9, 10. Now they're in their 20s, and they're like, "Hey, man, it was like the greatest day of my life as a kid."
Well, the impact of it that you talked about, how many guys have actually caught a game-winning Super Bowl touchdown catch, is that there's kids that weren't even born that are Giants fans that know that Plaxico Burress caught the touchdown pass to beat the undefeated Patriots.
Yeah, man, it is something that, obviously, you could never imagine as a player. You spend so much time of your life through the journey trying to get there. And then when you get there, he knows it's like surreal. And I would say for that whole 4 quarters of that football game, from the time those white flags went up with the NY on them, I never felt my feet hit the ground for the next 4 hours. I mean, that's the feeling, that I had. I'm pretty sure all of my teammates did when we were out there on that football field.
Is that a commonality between your championship teams and his championship team, in the sense that it's the detail, it's the coaching, and it's the players putting in the extra time to be the best that they can be in those situations, to execute at the highest levels?
Oh, absolutely. I try and tell fans sometimes, I know you've heard this, but you almost don't want to believe that the difference between winning and losing can be the littlest, what seems like most insignificant thing that you think doesn't matter, but in that moment, just like he explained, can make all the difference.
Sean, I want to ask you about number 41 on this list, Bart Oates. As a teammate, a leader, and one of those guys that solidified that offensive line, talk about him as a player with the New York Giants.
Just have great thoughts about him. Number one, as a person. He and I were teammates for 12 years. If you open up the dictionary to professional football player, I mean, the way he practiced, took care of himself, he was very cerebral. I tell a story sometimes that, Bart, everyone knew he was in law school while we played, and he was such a perfectionist that if the snap was a little bit off, which it almost never was, he'd ask me about. And after a snap one time, he came to the sideline, he goes, "Was that high?" And I'm like, "No, don't worry about it, it was fine." And he never got angry, but he looked at me pretty angrily and he said, "Don't patronize me." And I said to myself, what does patronize mean? Is that like a law school word or something? But I didn't want him to know I didn't know what it meant. So I said, "I'm not patronizing you." And he goes, "It was high, wasn't it?" I said, "It was just fine." That's the kind of guy he was. He was just such a perfectionist. He cared so much. I mean, having to be out there and block, pass, run, everything, and then have to snap and cover on punts, the first 4 years was a tall order from him, but he never complained. He'd always be out early, and he was a terrific long snapper.
But think about how the game has changed. The starting Pro Bowl center was also the long snapper.
Unbelievable. When you're telling me, I was like, wow, he was the long snapper as well.
Oh, absolutely, and for the extra points. I mean, just a terrific player, and considered, one of the best pass blockers, if not the best pass blocker in the NFL when he played. So nimble for a big guy, and absolutely deserves to be on that list where he is.
Let me go to number 48 on this list, a teammate of yours, Jeremy Shockey. An incredible player. He called me back like 3 different times after I called him to tell him that he was in the top 100, screaming of joy and happiness and shock. And he called me thinking that I was punking him or something like that. But what was he like as a teammate?
I tell everybody this, that, man, he's a great person. And I narrowed my decision down to come to play in New York because I wanted to play with Jeremy Shockey. I understood offensively, this guy in New York is so dynamic, and he plays with an attitude, and he plays with a purpose and a passion that you want to be a part of. It was just a pure joy to be able to, be in a locker room with him every day and take the football field with him because, man, I seen him helmet pop off and trying to run guys over with no helmet on. And I get back to the huddle, I'm like, dog, what the hell are you doing, man? You don't have a helmet on. And he was that kind of player, man. And he was just so passionate about his craft and his position that sometimes it was, it was here, it was off the roof, but you just enjoyed playing with them as a player.
Incredibly, one of the most passionate players I've ever seen. He was like a colt, he was a wild horse, and he needed to dial it back a little bit. Maybe that held him back in some ways in career-wise, but the talent was off the charts.
Another tight ends on this list at 43, Bob Tucker, who was a brilliant player. He was the first tight end to lead the league in receptions in 1971. So, again, we talk about, today's era and how tight ends are used, and you think of Kelsey at Kansas City and Gronkowski and all that. But the Giants were kind of ahead of the curve with how they use their tight ends, especially with Fran Tarkington. I mean, and it sounds funny, right? He had 59 catches to lead the league. Different game. They could grab the guys all the way down the field, but a brilliant football player.
Ton of catches in that era, and he was a very smooth player. He just was an effortless route runner. Just a personal thing about Bob Tucker. One time, my father had a friend, his cousin was a big Giants fan. He took me to my first game at Yankee Stadium, and he knew Bob Tucker. Bob Tucker came to our house. My grandmother had to be at the house, and my father's cousin introduces, hey, Estelle, this is Bob Tucker. He plays for the New York Giants. My grandmother's 5'2". She goes, any good? So, and he was very magnanimous about it, but that, he just had it, and he was a very, very polished player. And again, the route running was just, it just made it very, very easy for whoever was just.
Well, it's kind of fitting that Shockey and Tucker are in this group because Tucker held the Giants record for most receptions by a tight end until Jeremy Shockey broke it. Tucker still holds the record for Giants tight ends for the most receiving yards. Rodney Hampton comes in at number 45, your teammate on Super Bowl 25. It's a crowded room he comes into with a lot of really good players at the running back spot, but he changed the dynamic of what the Giants' rushing attack looked like before he got hurt.
Yeah, Rodney was terrific. I can remember his rookie year in 1990. We were there in training camp, and I'd always get in the ice bucket to cool my legs down so they wouldn't get sore from punting. And I can remember early on, I said, Rodney, come and see me after practice. And, he's a 20-year-old rookie and doesn't really know me. And I get in the ice bath. I said, I want you to start doing this. I think this is going to be good for you. And his eyes kind of got big, and he's like, I don't know about that. And I just said, just trust me, it'll be good for you. And even to this day, when I see Rodney, he's like, man, that was so great that you told me to get in that ice bath early, just because his legs were how he made his living. But just what a wonderful guy, besides a great player. He had 5,000 or 6,000 yard seasons, and I know he and Otis kid each other sometimes. Rodney will say, Oates, you're lucky I got hurt, because if I didn't get hurt, I'd have been Super Bowl MVP in 25. You know, they go back and forth with that. But what a great career Rodney had, terrific player, and even better person.
I want to ask you, from a specialist standpoint, Pete Gogolak, one of the original soccer-style kickers, was one of the great Giants of all time.
You know, you talk about a historic deal. I mean, soccer-style kicking, you know, he's like the guy in the beginning, and that was a big deal, you know, when he started doing that. And to play for the Giants as long as he did, and from what I understood, he you know, he stayed in the area, had a very successful career after football in New York, and you know, but just one of the guys, one of the original sidewinders, if you will. You know, now that for years there's just been generations of soccer-style kickers, and you know, he was like the original guy.
And still holds the franchise record for the most points scored.
Yes, and also
that's pretty amazing after 99
It really
seasons.
is, and he helped form the NFL as it is today, because he signed from Buffalo with the Giants. So he left the American League and went to the National Football League, and it kind of created this signing war. And the NFL had been losing players, but once Gogolak signed, that really signaled the beginning of the NFL's kind of war with the AFL and then the eventual merger of both leagues.
Bob, at number 44 on this list is Jack Stroud, who played 132 games for the Giants, part of that 1956 championship team on the offensive line. The guy helped the Giants get to 6 NFL championship games. He went to the Pro Bowl 3 times. He was a multiple first team or second team All-Pro. That tradition and that thread of championship teams and offensive lines goes back and back and back.
Yeah, it really does. And Stroud is probably, you think Rosie Brown is the iconic offensive lineman for the Giants, but Stroud is right there. And you talk championship pedigree, he had it, and then some. And you know, those teams were kind of defined by what their lines did, and he was as good as there was.
Number 49 on this list, if you're a certain age and you say Spider, everybody knows Spider Lockhart. 3rd in franchise history in interceptions, behind only Emlyn Tunnell and Jimmy Patton. 145 games as a Giant, a Pro Bowler. You know, this is a guy that during the lean years was one of the shining bright spots that the New York Giants had.
So talented. He was athletic. He was very, very fluid, very smooth, and he was a ball hawking defensive back. So he got his share of interceptions, and back then, even, you know, there were bad teams, but they were good defensive teams. They would lose, but their defense generally showed up, and Lockhart was at the front of that line.
Spider Lockhart was one of the beacons of hope. You guys wore his patch during Super Bowl 21. As a player, did you guys as a group understand the significance? Because he had been battling cancer and he died, and the Spider Lockhart patch 43 was on. Did you guys understand what he meant to this franchise?
Initially, I don't know how many of us did. Certainly, we all knew who he was because he's been such a great player here for so long. But, you know, not very often. You see it more today, but back then, very seldom did you see a team put a patch on a jersey for a player. So I think all of us, you know, really understood what he meant to the team. I learned a lot more about him, you know, what kind of player he was. And, you know, it turns out that year we won the Super Bowl. It's, you know, it's easy to look at a picture, you know, and you can know right away it's that Super Bowl season where you see that white patch with the red spider on it. And, you know, it was something different because, you know, I'd never been through that before where you had a patch. And, but, you know, certainly he deserved that. And, so great that, you know, the year that was on there that we were able to win the Super Bowl.
Ray Flaherty comes in at number 50. So this is a guy who has his number 1 jersey retired. Pro Football Hall of Fame 1976. Helped the Giants win a championship in 1934. This is a guy who led the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, yards per reception, yards per game. He was a dominant figure in the NFL, revolutionary player.
He dominated his time. And when you have a leading receiver like that, when you have those championships, that kind of, you know, makes a mark.
And do you know this? He's the first football player, professional football player in league history to have his number retired. So
he's the first player ever?
First player ever in the history of the National Football League to have his number retired, number 1.
And his jersey number was number 1.
Yeah. So there you have it.
Fitting.
Fitting, very fitting. You know, as we look through this list and we kind of talk about players of the past, covering both of these guys, I want to get, what was it like covering Sean Landeta?
I loved, first of all, Sean was the best player to interview because you didn't have to use a tape recorder. He spoke very slowly. You could write down all his answers. But he had a personality that was great, and he loved it. You know, Sean loved being there. I remember the Super Bowl. We're out in Costa Mesa at the team hotel. Fans are going crazy for the Giants, right? I mean, it is just, they're rock stars. And we're in the hotel, and a crush of fans is in the lobby, and you come down out of a stairwell and say, is there anyone see a payphone around here? But you're surrounded by these fans, and you loved it. But I think that kind of symbolizes that you love that moment, and he was a big moment type of player. And you know, not everyone is like that. And Sean rose to the occasion so many times, and you know, and his longevity was remarkable. But I know that first championship year was pretty special, and you really reveled in it.
Oh, sure. You know, I never played football until I was a senior in high school, and went to a Division II school. Fortunate to play well, and you know, here you are. You're 22 years old. You're in the Super Bowl. You're in the NFL. 22, 23, and you know, just unbelievable. You know, how is this happening? It's something every kid wished, but now this is really happening for you. And just, you know, I did, and I'm so glad I took it all in, and, you know, was just so happy to be part of it, and, you know, to talk to you guys every day, and, you know, just loved every part of it. And, you know, I'm glad I felt that way about it, because even though I played all those years, they went by so quick, but to be able to look back and felt like you drank it all up. You enjoyed all the things about it, because most guys, a lot of guys will tell you, because it goes so quick that, you know, the old phrase, you don't stop to smell the roses. And that's easy to do because there's so much pressure to play well, practice well. Are they going to have me back next year? I got to make the team. You know, but, you know, I'm just glad I tried to take all that in. And one of the reasons was, as a punter, they only keep one on every team. And you got to make the team every year. So you hoped you would be there, but you never knew how long you were going to be there. So I think that was part of it too, that it's like, well, you're here this year, so, you know, take it all in. And yeah, I'm just glad I was able to do that.
Bob, obviously Plaxico, different era. When Sean was there, you know, you could just go sit in the locker room, and those little tables in the locker room, and Matt Barr would be holding court, and Sean would be around. You can go from locker to locker. Bill Belichick, the defensive coordinator at lunchtime, would wheel that bike through to eat a sandwich while he was watching, but he would stop and talk to the press. Plaxico's time, it was a little different, a lot more organized, a lot more restricted. As you covered this group, though, and watched them sort of mature, and then in 04, Eli comes in, and then 05, they get to the playoffs, lose to Carolina. They didn't play well. Then the Philadelphia come up a little bit short, but watching this team, what was it like being around these guys?
You know, it was better than it is now. It's very restrictive now, but we got to know them pretty well, I would say. And one of the unspoken and underrated aspects of that 07 season, you know, after 06, Coughlin had a problem, right? He was too intense. The players didn't need him to just constantly like that, right? He brought writers in. He spoke to everybody. Hey, like, this is the coach of the New York Giants in the 07 offseason saying, Bob, what can I do better? Neil Best, what can I do better? He's bringing people in. I said, well, you know, Tom, I knew you when you coached as receivers. We could be with you. You asked about our families. You know, you were just a normal guy.
Right, because he came to the team in '88.
He came to the team as a receivers coach from Green Bay. And I was like, show them that. Show the players that, you know, that you care more. Call them by their first names, you know. There's so much that you can do, right? Now, he writes it down on a memo pad, but he did. He opened up. He became much more of a father figure, right? And that allowed that team to blossom in a way that it was an immediate result of what he did. And he has star players. You don't need to be told what to do all the time like that. And I think it kind of let it organically flow up, and you're potential was reached. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I did. It was a little adjustment for me coming from Pittsburgh, because it was, come as you are, and the media in Pittsburgh was like 4 or 5 people in the locker room, and I come here and it's like 40. And it's, nobody really cared about practice. But when you were here in New York, if you dropped the ball in practice, it made the newspaper. You're like, this is crazy. It's just a drop ball in practice. But I would say with Coughlin, when I first got here, it was a little, like iron on iron kind of deal. And I didn't really understand a lot of the things that, were going on. I tried my best to do to kind of, go along with, what his coaching style. But in that 07 year, he did form a committee of guys, and he did become a little bit more lenient in some of his rules and different things like that. And it did translate into us, believing in the system, becoming closer as a team, and really buying into what, he was teaching and coaching.
Guys, this has been a tremendous honor to sit with you, Plaxico, Sean, and to celebrate this top 100 list with 2 men that you can't write the history. That was one of the things that we used as a determining point, right? Can you write the history of the franchise without these players?
No, you cannot.
And one more thing, man. I just want to say thank you to Ernie Accorsi for, bringing me here and believing in me that I could bring this franchise a world championship. In his book, the GM, he wrote a chapter for me, chapter 4, and I will always be grateful for Ernie and bringing me here to this great organization.
It was a huge move, and very aggressive and needed.
Yeah, if I can second that, George Young, the same thing with me. I'm never here if it's not for George Young. He was from Baltimore. He kind of knew about me at Towson when not too many people did, and I don't believe I ever would have been a New York Giant without him, so always will be grateful to George, and certainly Bill and everyone else who gave me the opportunity to be a New York Giant. And again, thanks to the committee who chose me to be on this list. It's great.
Plaxico, Sean,
congratulations.
Bob, a lot of fun. Make sure you check out all the Giants social media platforms as we continue our countdown to the top 100. You've been watching the Giants' top 100 players presented by Bud Light.